Something that I hope I've made pretty clear in this podcasting process is I make it a goal to not discuss exclusively gaming topics because, well, for a couple reasons. One, it'll be way too easy for me to do that, right? It's like, oh, well, yeah, here's a gaming thing, and here's a gaming thing, here's another gaming thing. That's too easy to do, right? Plus, I know that people want a little bit of variety. You don't always care only about video games, and I certainly would not reach nearly as many people as I would like to if I talked exclusively about video games. It's really that simple, right? So when I was making this episode, I was thinking about, gosh, what non-gaming thing do I want to talk about? ¿Qué debo hablar sobre? And that's when it hit me. I should talk about something that's constantly on my mind because I'm working on it pretty frequently. Mi español, my Spanish. Soy un orador de español. I am a Spanish speaker. It is not my first language, it is my second language. And Spanish is a language that I've been learning since the 4th grade, which is likely earlier than most individuals in the United States. But it, unless it's your first language, then you've been learning it since birth. But it seems to me like most people learn a foreign language at the earliest in middle school, at the latest they learn it first in high school in the US. I know that some elementary schools have like a Spanish club that they, after school, that they teach Spanish in. That isn't actually how I got it. I had Spanish as an actual class, but that's a whole separate, longer story about my schooling days. But, suffice to say, I've been learning Spanish for quite a while, and I know a good bit about forming the language. Grammar is something that has always been my stronger suit in Spanish. I never feel like I know enough Spanish vocabulary. Like, I could figure out how to get by if I were just plopped into Spain, or if I was like flying and all of a sudden I have been dropped off into I don't know, Costa Rica or something. Like, oh no, the plane's going down. Like I could get by, but there are plenty of instances where I would I have no idea what to say because I've never learned the word that I need to use. Like right now, it's ironic because I would argue that a bunch of the things that get taught in Spanish language classes aren't really as useful as they should be. Like, let's see, I'm learning about things like business stuff, salaries. I was like, that's great, but I don't know how much I'm going to use the word salary or bonus or, teller in Spanish. That's not to say they have no use. That's not to say I'm never going to use them, but those are words that seem a little bit more superfluous to me than words I would use in common contexts, or even just words that I use all the time. Like, I was just talking a whole heck of a lot about controllers in the last segment, but I have no idea what the word controller is in Spanish. What's even a good example of a common word, like something that you see every day that you don't think about, like I do a lot of walking, so I use a lot of crosswalks. I have no idea what the word for crosswalk is in Spanish, but it's a word that I could reasonably use because I use them all the time. It's like, don't walk in the crosswalk until you see the man symbol. no camina en el... I don't know the word. Or actually, it also could be la. It's a noun. I don't know what it is. And that's frustrating because I would really like to be able to speak Spanish in as many instances as possible, but if I don't know the word, kind of screwed on that now, aren't I? But regardless, Spanish is something that I want to use in the future. I mean, chances are I will use it in my job. Like, if you remember from the very first episode, I talked about it's like, oh, it would be my dream job to be a legislator. And the big point of knowing another language is that it helps you reach out to more people. Now, if you've been watching some of the presidential coverage for a while, you know that there's plenty of politicians who use it in a pandering way. Cory Booker and Beto O'Rourke. Those are a couple who are long gone out of the 2020 Democratic presidential primary who pandered using Spanish in the Democratic debates. And that's not how I'd want to use it. I would want to use it in, like, actually forming, like, hey, I'm going to have a Spanish spoken only town hall event because I have Hispanic constituents that I want to reach out to, right? That's to me at least, maybe I'm wrong. That feels like a very different scenario than I'm gonna give my grandstanding talking points here on stage where I'm pointing with my thumb because that's the finger that people point with. But I'm gonna say my canned talking point in Spanish right now to you because I want to make sure that I know those Hispanics are coming out for me. That's what I'm envisioning in a pandering person's mind when they do that. But I'm getting a little bit off track here. Even let's say I don't end up being a legislator, right? Let's say I end up working for a company that would care about me having a political science degree. Knowing another language makes me a more desirable candidate, and I should receive a little bit more money every year because it's like, oh great, you know another language, you can work with more people who also know that language. Here's a little bit more money for doing that, right? That's perfect. It's a great reason to know another language. Excuse me. Ooh, just had a little gas there that almost came up. What about some other uses? Maybe a Spanish creative outlet podcast. I don't know. Maybe if I were in a scenario where I had enough free time to re-record the creative outlet podcast in Spanish, I would be willing to do it. But the odds are, shock and surprise, I will not have the time to take the English podcast and redo it in Spanish. Well, it's funny. Another one of the people that I like, I brought up, obviously earlier I talked about Cinemassacre. It's a very entertaining channel. I've talked about, I've talked about Pat and Ian of the CU podcast. I've talked about Kyle Kalinske of Secular Talk, but another one of the people I like is David Pakman. Now, he's a bit of a weird guy. I don't know if I wouldn't say I like him entirely if you're purely talking politics and style, because he definitely gets into that sort of high-minded academic mode sometimes. At least that's what I've seen. I can get into him here and there. It's not like I hate the guy. It's not that I think he's terrible. And regardless of whether you agree with his politics, that's really not what is important to me here. I'm just bringing him up because you wouldn't know it, but he's from Argentina. He was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And he mentions that on the show. That's why I'm okay with bringing it up. And so he's brought up on a number of occasions the idea of broadcasting his show in Spanish. But the thing is, there's a lot of hoops to jump through to make shows like this and shows like his in the same quality as what you get in English. And I feel much the same way. It's like, I don't have the time to re-record what I'm doing here. And I've already spent, if I look at the timer here, it's been an hour and 5 minutes, which is actually quite a bit shorter than the last 2 episodes, but that's beside the point. I don't really have the time to re-record that hour in Spanish. And, translation bots that dub over what you're talking aren't really up to snuff yet to be a good alternative because they just don't sound human. Like, how would you like to hear the and let's just say I was recording this in Spanish, right? And I was like, maybe I should release it in English. It's like, how would you like to hear the English robotic version talking over me like this and trying to keep up with what my mouth is saying? That would not be very enjoyable. Now, would it? And I can't really foresee anybody out there who wants to dub my work in Spanish, but you know what? If there is someone, that would be really, really, really cool. And I mean, yeah, I could put subtitles, but subtitles I've always found are never as enjoyable as just being able to, honest to goodness, listen to the piece. Because that is half of the sensory detail of a video, and in this case, the entire sensory detail of a podcast is the speaking, right? So I can't foresee it. Entonces, no creo que vaya a producir mi podcast en español en el futuro. Lo siento. But yeah, that's my one non-gaming segment from this podcast. At least 1/4 of the podcast has to be about something other than gaming, and today I thought it should be Spanish. So I think I'm about ready to wrap this up here.